Okay, first up is Vivian. Okay. Yeah, the first thing I notice is the resolution. It's only 320 by 180, and that's why it looks pixelated in this view. The assignment was to do description says 640 by 480, but I'll take it larger as well. But this is too small, and so it looks really pixelated, and makes it harder to kind of judge. I like all the depth with the question marks. That's good. I probably would not go with two different fonts here. You have Obscure Company of Productions. Typically, that would all be the same font, and this one's too close to Comic Sans, which is something that should be avoided. So, yeah, I might try doing something different with the fonts. And then at the end, there's some weird little that weird jumpy thing. I think that's if it's not an error, it looks like an error. That right there at the end. And then this is okay. I think you could have done more with it. Maybe offset the firing of the gun so you have one at the other. I probably would have chosen a different gun, one that was more reminiscent of the Old West, like a revolver, whereas this gun is more of a modern-looking gun. And then you could do other things like a muzzle flash or some smoke, or maybe when they, rather than just rotating, maybe they move back a little bit as well. But overall, it came together, so you got it done. Good work on that. Next up is Anna. Okay, so some good improvements here. Let's watch that again. I think that's improved some. I think it still could maybe pause a little bit, and then scratch a little faster, but I think it definitely has improved. You've got a door opening there. I think that let's watch that. Just back it up a little bit. I'm trying to see that shoulder thing you're talking about. Oh, I see. At the beginning there. That's interesting. So here, are you talking about? And then it disappears there. Yeah, I'd have to look at the After Effects file. I mean, I feel like maybe there's another layer that becomes invisible or visible at some point there. It's hard to tell why that's happening. If you sent me the After Effects file with all the supporting images, I could take a look. Yeah, I mean, I think this white for the door opening works okay. And putting the hat on is alright. I think you could improve this by just making that go way faster. So what I would probably do is, put the hat on, pause for a moment, and then really quickly, like over, a quarter or a fifth of the time, just maybe 4 frames or 3 frames of animation, just have the arm quickly move down there. And I think if it wasn't so slow, it would draw less attention to itself. And then the other thing is with this, it's a nice effect except for the way it's bounded by this square. So I'm wondering if you did that and pre-comped it and brought the pre-comp in here, or if it's limited. I'm just wondering what's limiting it by that area. Because I think it would be better if those beams extended outside of this rectangle rather than being cropped off. And again, without seeing the After Effects thing, I'm not sure, but my guess is that it was you did that and then you pre-comped it and you brought the pre-comp, into this sequence. And if that's the case, don't do it. Just if you did the effect just on the text, right? As just a text layer all in the same comp, I think it wouldn't do that cropping thing. Um, so, anyways, whatever it is, try and figure out how to make it not crop there. I think it'll be better. Yeah, other than that, it's looking good. Next up is Deonte. Okay, so some good improvements here. I like the different layers. Maybe go a little bigger on the text for the other titles. That one's good. I think that that looks a little small and low, so I might go bigger with that. And you have this moving, and then you have it slow down and stop before the transition. And what would look nicer is if it just kept moving all the way through the transition. I think it would give it more. And same here, it slows to a stop, and then we transition. And what looks nicer is if it continues to transition through the that it continues to move through the dissolve, so that it never stops, and then the two kind of motions cross each other. It looks nice. So yeah, it's very different, but from the last one. But I think this turned out well, and a few tweaks can improve it. Next up is Jaemin. Alright, so this is looking good. Let's watch it again without the audio. I like those bullet shots at the beginning. I still think that this could be cleaned up a little, like just where this meets here, and maybe it's that I don't like this sharp corner there. I'm not sure. But it does look better than it did. Or maybe maybe the M was just simpler. If it would just, if it came down from here to like the center of this distance here, say like there, it just went dun dun dun. I think that would be better. I think maybe I'm struggling with this shape as being part of an M. Anyway, something to try. And this, I mean, I like that you added a little bit of orange to it, but I think that what we've lost a little bit is, so now it looks a little bit more like we're seeing a fire through the letters. And I think what you had working well before was that it felt like the letters were just being burned into the wood, but now it's like we're seeing through the letters to a flame that's behind it at some points. And I think, actually think that, so I mean, I know I suggested putting a little orange in there, but I think what I was imagining was something more like little parts of this are getting hot enough to see bits of orange, in little areas, but instead what it feels like we're seeing is we're seeing the fire through the text, which is a very different thing and doesn't necessarily work with that idea of the wood, of the letters being burned into the wood. So I mean, it's good that you made the effort to get some of the the orange kind of burned flame in there. I think the way you did it maybe took away from the feeling of the letters being burned into the wood. So I might take another pass at that. But yeah, overall it came together well. Next up is Jersey. Okay, so definitely a lot of improvements here. like the sound effects. The rain looks alright. I think you sort of have a lot of different directions with the rain, which I don't think you usually see that much. Usually it's all kind of mostly the same direction. I think the lightning's interesting. It's very stylized, but you know, it's kind of cool and it works. Yeah, it's a nice transition. I still think, it looks like you adjusted the timing of this somewhat, but I still think it could be a little faster in parts. And then here, yeah, maybe just even faster with the bullet, because with bullet, you know, you really think of speed, and that wobbliness in the movement of the bullet just makes it feel somehow slower, so maybe think about speeding that up. Yeah, it's overall, there's a lot of good work in there. Next up is George. Okay. So yeah, definitely some improvements here. Still think you have that kind of thing where the sort of a long dissolve between these two. I guess the fade out in the background, and I think the way you've transitioned the text is an improvement. I think that I guess I'm not really loving this font, just the way there's no hole in the E and things are kind of bleeding together, so might play with a slightly different font. I mean, I think it's the same font as this one, but somehow in all caps it works better. Maybe just try it, same thing, but all caps, and it would work better. And also, I wouldn't tend to. I guess one thing, when it says Bandito Studios on the screen, that should be sort of the most dominant thing on the screen. But you have this giant wanted at the top, and I feel like, besides being lowercase letters, it's also a smaller font, and it just seems like Bandito Studios should be the most important thing on the screen, whereas it's the wanted text which seems to have the most emphasis. So I might, do something, maybe just get rid of the wanted, or make the Bandito Studios bigger. Also, even the word presents is bigger than Bandito Studios, and I guess maybe it had to do with you trying to fit it side to side here, but maybe you need to make the logo a little bit smaller and put Bandito over Studios, or get rid of the wanted thing, or I don't know, try something different there. I think it's funny how he's sort of dodging that. I'm not as fond as that little movement afterwards, just because it doesn't feel as justified, that kind of wobbly thing at the end, but getting pushed up. So I think actually if you just did that and then just left it still, and not put all that, and then had them pushed off, that would be better. And then for this, it's tricky to have a solid colored text here, in that this area is kind of dark, and that's looks like 100% white here, and then again it's very dark there. So if you use white text, you lose it in the sun. If you use black text, it's a little just hard on these darker areas. So one option actually might have been to take this and move it, say, up here, and if you did solid white up here, that might read really well. Or even just anywhere where it's not intersecting the sun. I think you could have done white text and gotten a better result. So maybe try that out. Yeah, but good work. It's looking nice. Next up is Clive. Okay. So it looks like there's a few improvements here. Let's take a look again. I think this could have been made more interesting if you got this to move separately with the puppet tool. Not real fond of the choice of font. Sort of just doesn't look like a font that's kind of scripty font. It doesn't seem like what you would normally see with the name of a studio. So I might try something different, and I'm not sure why Presents is so low in here. It seems like kind of odd placement. And I think the same goes for there's something, I don't like the frame around here. I think it should blend into the rest of the image. And then also it's very much pinned to the corner, so it at least give it some more space there. And I mean, you've got all this empty area in the frame here, so it feels kind of strangely weighted to this side. Or, you know, what you might have done is done like the bank's defender and then have this bank come in either nearly as far as you did or all the way to where you did. But, you know, maybe leave a little bit more room for the text here, and then you're kind of using all this blank space better. Whereas here it feels kind of pinned in the corner. But I think the silhouette at the end is interesting. So yeah, some interesting elements. I think definitely, you know, room for improvement, but overall it came together. Next up is Haley. Okay, so let's just take a look again with the audio off. So you got the fade up, it sort of pulses for a moment before it fades away, and then you're doing the see-through effect. And I don't know if you noticed, but see if I can catch a frame of it. As this moves, you see some what's called interlacing. Like right there. So check your render settings to make sure that you have it set to progressive and not interlaced, because it looks, well, interlaced, which is bad and unnecessary. And you can see that kind of flickering on and off as that moves. So it should be progressive, not interlaced when you render it out. And I think, you know, I think conceptually the idea of seeing a scene through text is interesting, but I guess the choice of having one background and then seeing another background through a superimposed image is kind of an odd one. Like, I would think that if I was seeing, you know, these images through the text, that I would not have another background here also. So I don't know, just try a different choice on that. And I guess also, I mean, one thing that's nice is rather than a still image on a background, you know, seeing through the text as to have a moving image is, you know, tends to be more exciting. So like getting a video source for that might be more interesting. But I think that that combination of seeing one background through the text on another background is just a bit busy, although the font choice is good. So I think that could use some more attention. And just, you know, this is fine, but it's just sort of the kind of the minimum, you know, just fading the text up and down on a background. So it'd be interesting, you know, interesting to try to do something to take it further. Next up is Joshua. I think, you know, I brought up a couple issues here that don't really seem to have been addressed, which is I think that this sort of damage on the letters here isn't really helping. So, and it just makes it hard to read, especially against the busy background. Like if these letters were against black, you know, it would be alright to have that damage, but I think with all this other stuff that's going on in the background, it just makes it hard to read. And I mentioned also, because it has that look of sort of a, you know, neon, it might be interesting to make them glow, but it looks like this damage is just built into the font, but then maybe you just want to try a different font. I just don't think it works well against the background. I mentioned before about making the sun round rather than oval, I think. I think that, you know, breaking up the guns and that thing, that worked well. And just make sure you're, you know, fading up and down at the beginning and end, you know, and fading up the audio as well. But yeah, a lot of good elements in there. I think a few improvements could take it to the next level. Next up is Chavis. I wasn't able to open it up in VLC or QuickTime. Something about the codec, not sure what the deal is with that, but here we go. Okay, so yeah, I think the sound needs some work. I think that the logo's okay, and probably one glow would have been sufficient, but then this is really weird to see the small thing on here with the Maya elements, and I just don't think that's working well at all. I think that you need to replace that part with something else entirely, because that doesn't seem to be working well. So yeah, I think that, yeah, the opening logo is okay, the glow is alright, but then I think the spaceship thing doesn't fit well, and to have that play blast thing with the Maya elements just feels a little kind of thrown together and unprofessional. So I think you definitely need, you know, some work on the second half. Also, you don't have a movie title in there either, so you just have the logo name and not the title. So yeah, I think you need to, you know, you could definitely improve this. Okay, next up is Santa. Okay, so just a few improvements in here. I think, yeah, it's good that you made the river darker. I think that, you know, the choice of the sparkles as a way to show that being water, I think it isn't working, because they look too much like fountains. I like that you lined this up with the moon. I think that's good. It also looks like you've reduced the speed of the clouds, which helps a lot. I think we maybe just stay in this a little bit longer than we need to. One thing you could also try that might work well is to fade away the rest of the background, and just have the moon there when the moonlight magic thing comes up. But yeah, I think, you know, really you're kind of overdoing it with the river here, because if you just, you know, what you might have just done really is just kind of taken this whole cloud and sky image and then kind of flipped it by scaling it to like negative 100% in the y direction. You know, do a duplicate of it, flipped it negative 100 in the y direction, then use this river shape as a mask on this, but then, you know, have the blue river on top of that, and you know, adjust the opacity so that you're still seeing the blue, but then you're essentially, what I'm saying is you make it so you're seeing a reflection of the sky in the water, and you'll see that movements of the clouds. If you send me, you know, the After Effects file and all the supporting files, I could demonstrate it, so that maybe makes more sense. But I think that would have been the thing to do, is basically fake it so it looks like you're seeing the reflection of the sky in the river, rather than doing the little sparkly fountain things. And I think that, you know, that looks kind of cool. I guess that's okay, the little stars going up. But honestly, I think there's a lot going on there, so you don't even need that. You know, you could have done without it. So yeah, definitely a lot of good elements here. A few tweaks could improve it. And I thought with this, the text is good, gunshot idea is good, but it might be better instead of having them all appear at the same time to have them appear one after the other, boom, 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 boom. And then if you wanted to add gunshot noises with that, great. If not, it still would be better to see them coming one at a time rather than all at once. Um, yeah, and then fade it down at the end rather than cut to black immediately. Next up is Melissa. Nice. Okay, yeah, this is working well. I think the choice of having the cloud disperse, I think, helps with that. Maybe a little bit too much going on with this text. I think you really want the audience to see and read this, and the presents is so small and so bent and distorted. Maybe bigger text, maybe tone down the clouds a little bit. Not sure. Also, with this spinning, I mean, it's kind of your eye is sort of drawn to that very bright moving object. So maybe the sun dies down, or maybe as the cloud fades away, the camera zooms in on this, fills up the screen, and then the sun is left off the screen. But I think coming up with some solutions just to make this a little clearer, easier to read, could make it a little better. And it is really hugging the edge here, so I think maybe give it a little more space at the edge. And then that's okay. I still feel like we got some of the kind of it's a bit dark on the edge, but I think that's improved some. Yeah, and I like the particles here, and the camera move is looking kind of cool. Although it might be interesting, it's just seems the camera move seems kind of abrupt at the end. So maybe if you could, at least put like a easy ease on the keyframe that starts that movement, so it's just like a smoother start. That might help, and then maybe slow that down and have it last a little longer could also help. But overall, yeah, a lot of really good looking elements. It's coming along nicely, looking good. Okay, next up is Leo. So yeah, it's got the basics in there. I think your text is crowding the edge too much. You probably scale that down a little bit. The logo's good, although you might think of something more creative as far as doing some motion on there, because it's pretty static. And then same here, it's you've got some movement, but it might be good to do something maybe to add some depth, some foreground objects, some background objects, so it doesn't look quite so flat. And then maybe rather than having the image stop, have it continue to pull out once the divine shows up. So it's fine. I think you could have just done more. It seems like to be, it's put together properly. It just feels like the minimum as far as the animation you've done. So you might have tried to do, just something more to take it to the next level. Next up is Wilson. I know at least some of the things I mentioned haven't changed, that I think still need some work. I think you've got a few interesting elements. Like I think I mentioned that I don't think this graphic is really working, especially with it all transparent. I think you just need to find something else. I also mentioned if you're going to do the glass thing, to have them show up one at a time. I also think it's a little odd that presents lingers that long. And then the longest day maybe doesn't really tie into the bullet holes as well as it could. So getting it to fit around there or be combined with that might be better. So yeah, it feels a little unfinished, and I think there's not really a fade down at the end either, but either with the video or the audio. So yeah, I think it feels a little unfinished. I think you could put a little more time into it and improve it. Okay, now we've got Shanice. Okay, definitely some improvements to the issues we were having last time around. I think the background, is clearer now and kind of makes more sense. Still, maybe feel like you could go solid with the text rather than partially transparent the whole time. And then same here, I think that the guns look kind of strange to me as transparent. I think it's a lot better. I mean, the choice of guns is better and it's clear that they are guns, so the graphic is much improved. But maybe they should be solid against the background. So yeah, you've got the fade up, fade down. The elements will look improved. So definitely improved over last time.